we have our jungle theme tutorial. I'm going to keep my text version of it over here. This is just off the website. But I'm going to start scrolling through the instructions. So it says we've got everything set. The files are all set. We're going to go to File, New, and where we usually have construct crash. Perfect. So we'll start construct up again. File, New. And I'm just going to make a new empty project. Okay? So we're going to adjust some of the size for the layout. Right now I'm going to scroll out. We're going to change the layout size to 4,000 by 2048. So we got that 4,000 by 2048. So this is going to get a lot bigger than what we've usually done. Guys, do we have that change in the back? Because I hear conversation going on, but I'm not seeing the changes happening on your screens. Okay, Sammy, what's up? Sammy, I can't hear you. I can't hear Sammy. There's too much conversation going on.
What number did you change it to?
I changed it to 4,000 by 2048. So if you need, the instructions that I have are here attached to Google Classroom. So you can follow along with these instructions. If you don't hear me say something or something's too small to see from in the back, you can get that and check and see it there. Okay? So we've created a new project and we've changed the size of our layout to 4,000 by 2048. All right. So now what we need next is to insert the background. So if we go to double click anywhere on the layout, it'll say insert it, and we've always done sprites. What we're going to try now is we're going to try a new tile background. And what that tile background will do is it'll just repeat the image that we find. So we're going to browse in our own H drives for that background image. So I'm going to choose Open, and I'm going to go to my Jungle Platform folder, and I'm going to find background image, and I'm going to grab the background image. Okay? If I zoom out, I can now see what that background image is, and I can see the size of it is 1024 by 2048. When I click OK, you can see the sprite isn't fully visible, because remember, the default size for the sprite is not this size. When we lay it out on the screen, the default size is 512 by 512. So we have to stretch this background out so we can actually see it. And what you'll notice is eventually it starts repeating itself. So it repeats left and right, but it also repeats up and down. So right now I can see the top of the image starting again. We want to get it sized so it's the perfect size to fill this background. So what we can do there is we can say, set the size to be 4,000 by 2048. And now we can set the position to 0, 0. And what you'll see is the tiled background is here. And it's exactly what we would see for the Jungle Platformer. So we have the image. We've set its size and position to 4,000 pixels wide by 2048 pixels high, and it just starts to repeat. So you can see there's the pattern repeating, but it's the same thing for a lot of games. A lot of times the background repeats. So we can zoom out, see the whole thing, but we want to make sure that we don't accidentally move this by clicking on it and sending it somewhere. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the Layers tab, and right now Layer 0 is where we are. I'm going to rename this to be Background, and then I'm going to lock the background layer. I'm going to add a new layer, select it, and rename it to Main. So now I can't accidentally click on the background and move anything, and I've got my main layer here. Everybody got that so far? Archie, you got that? Okay, because I'm waiting for your size to update. Grayson, you got that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, we basically have the layers here applied. We're managing the layers in the project bar. We've got a background layer that's locked. And we've got a new layer called main. So the reason why we do that, we don't want to accidentally move anything, and we'll just keep an eye on it there. Yes? We'll change, yeah, we will eventually. You'll see what's going to happen. Like this, it's not there yet. So the next big thing, and this is the big part about today, is what do we do with that tile map? So the Jungle Platformer has a tile set, it's that image. We want to import them as a tile thing, but this time we're going to choose a sprite. So here, watch what we're going to do. We're going to double click anywhere around the main layer. Instead of doing a background this time, we're going to do a sprite. And it's going to go on the main layer. And instead of actually going and opening an image, I'm going to find this action frames window. It may be hidden behind your editor window, but it's there. This animation frame window. I'm going to right click on the animation frame window, and I'm going to import frames from SpriteStrip. We've done this before, so it's there. I'm going to go back in the Jungle Platformer, and I'm going to go find the tiles folder. There's only one tiles image here. That's it. I'm going to click OK, and a pop-up comes up for importing the SpriteStrip. From that pop-up importing the SpriteStrip, I need to figure out what size is it. Because it says it's 1 by 1, but I know it's not 1 by 1. I need to change this to be 12 by 12. I'm going to select Replace Entire Existing Animation. And that's going to delete the 0 empty frame that's there. So I do this, it's going to say, you sure you want to replace? And I'm going to hit OK. And then Construct 2 is going to chug away for about 20, 30 seconds because it's slicing up that image into 144 other images. And what you'll notice now is we have a bunch of sprites ready to go. So now you can see there are 144 images here. Some of them are blank. I'm not going to worry about it for right now because I think it's going to mess up the numbers for later. Like the number of each one is important. Okay? And before we leave here, I'm going to resize this. Oh, it did get set to 128 by 128. One thing you might want to check is check to make sure the pixel width on this when you go to resize it is 128 by 128. In period 1, for a few people, it was 130 by 130, and it made things not snap together nicely. So we've got all this information here. The origin point is in the middle. We'll deal with that as we need to go through. And what we'll see is here is our sprite on the screen. If I run my layout now, what did I forget to do? Stop the animation, because now it's cycling through all 144 images, 5 frames a second. So that's no good. So if I double click again, open up the animation window, I'm looking for this one. For default animation, I want to set the speed to 0 so that it will not animate. I can close the editor. If I run it again, we can see right here, it's stationary on frame 0. Whatever frame it's told to start on, that's the frame it's going to start on. Okay? Now, is sprite a good name for this? No, this is a better name for this would be tiles. So let's go and rename this tiles. And Construct 2 takes a moment. We have 144 frames. We lowered the speed to 0. And now we have it on the layout. So one of the things I want to see here, I'm going to zoom in on this part. And I'm going to show you something cool. So if I hold Control while this is selected and I drag, I can get more sprites of this tiles on the screen. The other thing I can do is I can change the property of each one. Right now they're all set to this lowest property default animation frame 0. If I do 1 and 10 and 13 from left to right, I now have a pretty cool platform for the character to run on. But it's not stitching together as nicely as I would hope it would. You can kind of see where I'm misaligning it when I zoom in. Right? So rather than driving yourself to a point of frustration by trying to line these up by hand, we're going to use a new feature of Construct that we haven't done before, which is Snap to Grid. Okay? So Snap to Grid you turn on in the viewport, and it's right here. So if I show the grid, this is what it looks like. It looks like a bunch of 32 by 32 pixels. And now Snap to Grid will show that this block, which is a derivative of 32 by 32, now can like perfectly snap in place. Right? I'm going to turn the show grid off because I don't really need it. But now if I select all of them, I can start to build a platform level just by dragging where these things are. Sammy, what's up?
Mine's just a black tile.
Yours is just a black tile.
Yeah, I have all this, other.
Because frame 0 is a black tile. Delete frame 0.
Oh, okay. I was sure if I was free.
Yeah, you're not supposed to have anything in there. And now change that frame number to 1, and then duplicate it, change it to 10, and duplicate it and change it to 13. Those are the 3 that I did to build these platforms,
Wait,
and I'm just moving them in blocks 3 at a time.
how do I take it out?
How do you make another one?
No, like, how do you take this out? I have one tile thing.
So by holding Control, I can click and make more.
Oh, okay.
Okay? So 1, I can come here and change this to be frame 1. I can change this one to be frame 10. These are just specific frames that I picked out that make a nice platform, or that they picked out for the tutorial that make a nice platform. Now, did you turn on Snap to Grid yet?
No.
All right, Snap to Grid goes on. Watch what's going to happen as I move these around. They have to stack close together. And once I have all of them selected, I can hold Control again and make another platform set. I think I have these overlapping, but you can fix that as we go through. Right? All right, you got Control again. So we were able to go through and build these pieces and kind of snap them together and move them around. So, do we need a minute to check around and see that everybody's got the platform working right? All right, I'll give a minute. Marissa, what do you got? By double-clicking on the animation, going to default animations, and setting the speed to 0. So when you click on it, the speed icon is over here where I'm hovering right now. So speed shows up over here. And that'll stop it from animating. Okay?
Wait, what was it? What was the 3 tiles? What was it?
1, 10, and 13. Okay? And those are just the 3 that kind of build this. Did you turn on Snap to Grid? All right, so you want to drag them all together and make another one? Drag a box around them all. Now hold Control and drag, and now you can make another level. But you only drag that one there. Remember, we use 1 and 2 to kind of give the left curve and the right curve. Because I could do a bunch of them like this. Ready? I could do a bunch like this, but that doesn't look as artsy as this one. Okay? So I could grab another platform here, but if I wanted to like kind of stagger them together, we want to leave them like that, and then grab the ones that have the curved edges. Okay? So it's just a way of making it look okay. All right. So I'm coming around trying to see that everybody's got sprites like this. Guys, how are we doing over here? Because I'm seeing nothing on your screens.
But there is
I'm
nothing.
doing
It's not working.
so good.
How come there's nothing on your actual game layout?
Because it's not working.
What's not working about it? Raise your hand when you have troubles. It says no items. What are you trying to do? I need more specific information. It's not working in no items.
It's because we have too many sites.
Okay, what are you trying to do right now? What do you want?
Okay,
You're
See
doing nothing.
what the player looks
If you
like.
want to stay in this class, you've got to work with it. Stop having the side conversations, or I'm going to put you on opposite sides of the
On the
class.
right. No. More right.
You don't want to stay in this class?
Yeah.
All right, listen, I'll email mom home and we'll
And then
have a
now-
conversation with Diane.
See the grid
I
show.
had multiple discussions with guys.
And they're keeping you in here because you need the
Try
credit.
to show grid.
No.
I love
I'm just
it.
gonna do science and stuff and switch.
Okay. so you're
Wait,
doing
which
class
ones are you
switch.
using?
You're not going to do it.
13.
You're going to stop my life. I'm gonna have a conversation with you.
Mine is a computer shop.
But if you're not working, I've got to come over here and redirect you. That's the problem.
This could be it.
How do I?
I don't.
I'm on the piece of business with you to make sure that you're here and working.
This is normal.
Oh my
Because
god.
you adjust the window
Alright,
size,
how do I
not the layout size.
Yeah, no, it is. I just didn't.
Layout size is not right.
If I, yeah, I was saying I'm really screwed.
Things are all on the grid.
So, can I
Dude, I'm
borrow
gonna
the seat?
add an increase,
So,
I'm gonna like hide
in the
the
instructions,
word
we adjust the
can't stop it.
size layout, which is a but it's still 1708 by 1906. Okay, so that's gonna be inside here, which we didn't adjust.
Oh,
because
I
that was
see.
still-
No, that's just not. Also, after years
Okay,
of drawing.
so now, this is what we're looking at.
I
That's right.
Dragon
That's the
Ball.
next step. Adjusting the size of the layout, now we're doing the size of the background.
That's exactly what I would
Add a
do.
notebook, and then add a tile
Does
background.
anyone want to see, does anyone want to see Dragon Knight? I only have like
And
5 minutes to
then
work.
in your
My
table,
graph.
Dragon
Dragon Quest, yeah.
Okay.
No, sadly, but. Seems cool.
Because we haven't done it.
There's a movie.
So he's stretching like instead of this out back.
Yeah.
Now I have 30. So then inside here, we change the size of the so now it's the right size.
That's.
Now you can
No,
choose
yeah.
the
Oh my god, oh my god. It make him a player.
And then we just set it to 0.
But for.
Okay. Now the next step we had on here was we wanted to grab the project log. And keep it
I
tight.
was gonna ask.
For layers, we
Yeah.
rename this one background.
You're literally just hacking at the other team because you're pissed because you're
And
losing.
then we locked it.
Literally not even like tactical
Layers,
fouls.
we renamed it
It's best to have the orange
Because
side
you're
of
mad.
it.
Yeah, because you just.
Archie, if you make
Literally
that
so
not
funny.
right, you make it
He had
back,
7.
don't do that for a
Because
while.
you should have fouled.
We have those systems all together.
This kid was hilarious. It was hilarious.
Okay,
Cupcake this morning.
so from there, it also works.
So I go like this, right?
Yeah.
I'm just like,
From there, we got the background
I'm
image.
like running the
Adjust
court,
the
right?
size and
And like,
position,
I
then we
then
lock
the
it
pass
up,
it, and it was like, bring it over here. And one. It's like,
The next part that we're doing here is this tile background. So on here,
Yeah.
we can go
Take
on
a
the
picture
layer,
now, I'm
insert
gonna
the
delete
sprite,
this in like 5 seconds.
and we're gonna go import sprite.
I don't see the difference.
Sprite strip. And we're gonna navigate to the tiles.
It's exactly.
The tiles is just one image, but it's got 12 by 12.
Yeah, I know, it looks like.
So we're gonna adjust this to 12 by 12. We're gonna replace the existing X-Reel. What it's gonna do is it's gonna chug it, it's gonna process it, and slice it this small. It takes 134 frames.
Well, why is the dragon that looks so realistic?
So from here, the only thing that's gonna happen is if we start our level now, and the lung is here like this, and you go.
Speaking of this,
I
does
don't know, it's exactly the
It
same.
looks the same.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the same picture. Oh,
So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go into
Oh,
the
no.
animation, which is high.
there's like a 3D Mewtwo Pokemon movie with
So now that that's set to 0,
Oh.
I use the trick.
so it's kind of the Pikachu kind of looks like the type of Pikachu but slightly not as
And then we set
So
this
it's like-
frame to 1.
Oh,
but it's not like humans, so it's just animated humans.
Oh,
so
okay.
it's like
And then this frame to 13. These are specific.
it's supposed to be about Mewtwo, but I feel it's like a remake.
You need one of these.
The one where they go to the island.
Okay.
It's
So
just
now,
Mewtwo is
if you can move these together, but is it tough to, and again, we can actually turn on the grid. You've seen good performance graphics, right?
Yeah,
So
I
we
mean,
just
some
snap
like
the
it.
grid 30 feet out of it.
This makes my mind
And once we have it there,
like
we
beyond
can start
that.
building more artistic looking
Like,
logo.
add,
Exactly. So
Yeah,
let's build a lovely little character.
Like,
So come around, can you show him that?
you can't
Right,
stop.
show him that. Let me see your level.
Like, this is
Yeah.
beautiful. Like, I.
Oh, so you found that you're making it
Like,
work in
some
flat.
people have talent, but they're
Stick
using
with
it.
these sprites now, because I don't have a sprite sheet to slice up for Crash Bandicoot, because we're gonna do animations on that.
That's cute. And then
Eventually,
there's
I want
like-
you to change. Stick with this one for now, because I want you to learn how to do
Also,
it.
that's-
Level,
I'm
level,
really-
level,
that's very cool.
level. Let me see your level. Level. Level.
Level.
I'm just going around to check and see that you have like at least a couple platforms. So you got this process down. Couple platforms, couple platforms, you're moving ahead.
Yeah, well, no. This is
Tile background.
This is level
So
one.
you called it tile background, but it's not tile background.
That's lovely. That's
Actually, make it
really
tile
high
background. And then you actually make it background. Not the tile image, that's horrible. You need that one between the background image. That watch the other piece. Background layer blocks, right?
Yeah.
There's the difference.
No, you should have asked for,
Now, I'm going to check the size of this.
That's the only way. That's the only.
And we set this to 0.0.
No, that's the only right way to buy, to use your money. You have to buy all
Now, we can have this back up again. The main layer is those, we're working on those.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But you don't want all these the right button. You'll see in a second.
Veronica.
Good.
Yeah?
Look what Anthony found.
Do we see the shapes and frame number?
Wait.
So over here.
Translate. I'll just look it up real quick.
Over here, change that one to 10. Click on that one. Change that one to 1. And click on that one
Wait.
and change that one to 13. Save.
I'm already disappointed.
Now on
Now
here,
this
go
is
to
worse.
view and turn on snap grid.
Exactly.
And now move closer to that.
Oh my god.
Now you see how they stack together because they're all the right
Dave
size.
and Dad.
And they're all the even. Now if you highlight everything.
That's
And hold on, one thing we're gonna change.
That just, oh my god, is that
Working on your
smart?
background. Yeah, we got those there. So let's unlock this.
I didn't, oh my god, that's amazing. Yeah. I didn't know this.
Hold control.
Yeah.
Right, and we'll change this to the obviously it's in the game. Now I can't access it. So I can use these. I have to hold control again. I can make another platform.
Yeah, that's what you
Platforms,
do.
Ibrahim?
Alright.
You got platforms, you're moving on to the characters? Alright. So we did a quick check to see where everybody was. Everybody has platforms.
Whoa.
And we've sliced everything up. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to add the player. So on this part here, I'm going to go and add another sprite on the main layer. Same thing, I'm going to import frames from Sprite Strip. And the player has a bunch of sprite strips. It has an attacking from crouching, attacking from standing, a hurt, an idle, idle to run, jump from stand, run, teeter backwards, teeter forward. So if you're on the edge, you can do these different pieces. Okay? I'm going to grab the idle animation, and I'm going to grab just the one that says the word idle, because all the other ones are the individual images. I don't want to have to import 11 frames at once. I want to just do this. But because the image isn't a rectangle, Construct knows that it needs to be divided up by 11 pieces. So it's 11 by 1. And I can go ahead and delete frame 0 because it was empty. I want my default animation speed to be 9. So I'm updating this. It's going to go through these 11 frames, 9 frames in a second. And I'm going to rename this animation to be idle.
Wait, which one is
This was player idle. Okay? And if I right click here and choose preview, I can see there's my character, but I've got a bunch of empty white space on the top. So one thing we can do once we add the sprite in is we can kind of trim things up. So if you hold shift while you press this crop button, it will crop all the frames at once. So I'm going to adjust this so you can see. So watch, all the frames are going to just get a little bit more centered. Holding shift, see how all of them popped upwards a little bit? Now the other thing I want to do here is I want to adjust the origin to not be on the center of the frame, but to be on the middle of the bottom of the frame. So if I press 2 on the number pad, 2 on the number pad will move this animation point to the bottom middle. But now I have to do that for every single frame. Or I could go to the frame where I moved it, right click on it, and say apply to the whole animation. So now all of these image points are here, and now when we go and do our idle, we can go preview. Here's our little character. He's going to be jumping up and down. Oh, I forgot to say loop yes. So that's why he's not going up and down. Loop yes. Now I'll preview it again. So now he's going up and down, waiting to move, waiting to run. So this is a little bit better than a block that we've been doing, because we've been doing the simple sprites. Okay? So from here, we've got the idle animation, 11 frames. We've cropped it with shift. We've set the image point down to the bottom. And we've looped the animation, and now we want to start adding some behaviors. So what's going to happen here is it's tough to maintain a hitbox. You've heard the term hitbox before in terms of video games? It's tough to maintain a hitbox for an animated character like this that's got like a really large area, and you don't want to adjust the hitbox for this one here. We're going to do a different trick for it, because you don't want to have to do what Veronica's trying to do for each frame. I don't want to actually go in through here and do the polygon edit and say it goes from here to here to here to here. I would have to do that for every single frame. There are 11 in this one, and there are 7 other animations that each have 10 to 15 to 20 things. So I don't want to actually do that. I'm going to leave this at its maximum. But what we're going to do is we're going to make an invisible hitbox that the animation follows. So it's not really going to interact with the player. It's going to interact with the player's hitbox. So on here we can see there's my person. I'm going to rename him from sprite, or like my little tiki face, sprite to player. And I'm going to make another sprite. It doesn't matter what I do for the color of this sprite. I'm going to pick a blue, and I'm going to lower its alpha to 50. So that way it's kind of transparent. Because eventually when the game starts, we're going to set its opacity to 0 so we don't even see it. Okay? But do yourself the favor now, lower the opacity, the alpha, to about 50 when you drop your paint in. And then that way you'll see this as the piece. So instead of calling this one sprite, I'm going to call this one player box. So this is the box that represents where the player actually is. And now I want to resize this box to be the size of the player. But notice now Snap to Grid is not helping me get it to be the perfect size. So I'm going to turn off Snap to Grid for a moment. I'm going to zoom in. And then I'm going to resize this. So in order to actually hit the player, you've got to hit somewhere in between the tiki match, not his gloves, and not the tip of his foot. Okay? So this is the player box that we're actually going to add our platform behaviors to. Okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to ask the game to move the player animation to the player box every time. Okay? So player box, we're going to right click and add behaviors. Mr. Wilkos. Yes, he is. Sure. Chase, save your game there. You're heading up to Pupil Services. All right, so I need platform. And then I'm also going to add scroll to. And what scroll to does is it makes the window follow this. So it's going to try and put it in the approximate center, or as best as it can. So now if I run this here, it'll fall through. The player box will fall through. But what I want to do is on the tiles, I want to add a solid behavior. So I'm going to right click on tiles, add solid. And then to test this right now, all we're going to see is now my player box moved, my screen goes, but we forgot my animation here. So, a couple things we're going to tweak on the platform controls. We're going to adjust the jump value on the player box behaviors. The jump strength, I'm going to change it from 650 to 1100. I'm going to change gravity from 1500 to 2500. Okay, so I adjusted the pieces here, so now I should be able to jump and make those gaps. But the player isn't really following the player box. So we're going to go over and add an every tick event. System, every tick. And the action we're going to add is to the player. And we're going to set position to another object. And that other object is going to be player box. So all we have right now is, and what do we forget to do with the player box? The image point 0 is in the middle of the player box. We want it to be down in the bottom of the middle of the player box. So image point 2 brings it down to the bottom of the middle. And now when every tick happens, this should be all set. So if I run this here, here's our player. And we may have to do a little bit of editing because the middle of the player hitbox doesn't cover the Tiki guy's face. And then my animation actually isn't happening, so I might have forgotten to hit loop. Or I did, and then I didn't save it. So loop is yes, run. And this is where I am so far. I've got an idle animation here, and this is where I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop the stream.